Mr. Daoudi, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your kind words. And it's a pleasure to be with everybody. Unfortunately, we are virtual. It would have been nice to be in person, but hopefully soon. How soon, I still don't know, but we remain ever the optimist. I'm just gonna, if you allow me, I'm gonna give a brief of what transpired over the past 7-8 months, and then a look into the future and talk a little bit about vaccines and how we as a community, the whole world, needs to come together in order to address and deal with this pandemic. As you all know and experienced, the world is still grappling with the unprecedented challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. When the pandemic hit early this year, WFP came up with an operational plan which allowed us to sustain our existing operations, feeding 100 million people, scale up to meet increased needs, set up a platform of services to enable the humanitarian and health response. We did that through different approaches, chief among them, and in order not to jump the gun and start asking for additional resources from our donors, we asked the donors to basically front load 3 months of their usual contribution, annual contribution, front loaded to enable us to pre-position as the video showed. We also adapted our delivery mechanisms by reducing congestions at distribution sites, putting health mitigation measures in place, and avoiding disruption by transitioning to different modalities. For example, as you all know and as you all experienced, schools were closed across the globe and in many countries where we operate. We immediately shifted to a take-home ration rather than school meals at schools in order to support the children and their families. Since then, WFP has scaled up to reach 96.6 million people by the third quarter of 2020. We have transferred almost $1.7 billion through cash-based transfers to vulnerable people in 67 countries. We have increased and enhanced our local and regional procurement of food to the tune of 844,000 metric tons since January this year. 13 million school children have benefited from WFP school-based programs. WFP has supported 50 governments with their social protections interventions. Today, WFP conducts continuous real-time monitoring in 39 countries. On the other front, other than sustaining and scaling up our operations, we also, as part of our mandate, put in place quickly a common service, what is known among the community as common services. We all know COVID-19 has caused massive disruption to global supply chains and basically a shutdown of the commercial sector. At the same time, there has been unprecedented market pressure, particularly for critical medical items. We quickly realized that this needed an extraordinary response to support not only the health response to the pandemic, but ensure that humanitarian operations could continue. We worked closely with WHO, the UN system, the NGO community, and governments to set up the common services, a system of cargo and passenger movement, and MEDEVAC services, meaning that health and humanitarian cargo and personnel can get to where they were needed, when they were needed. Basically to ensure that the entire community stays and deliver, and also assuring them of our ability to come and pick them up in case they have fallen ill to COVID-19 and they require medical evacuation. This involved setting up a network of 8 humanitarian response hubs, leveraging on WFP existing United Nations humanitarian response depots, for which cargo was moved to 171 countries. I'm going to repeat this number. We have been able to deliver humanitarian, but mainly health supplies to 171 countries. So far, we have dispatched over 98,000 cubic meters of cargo to nearly 90% of the world. 66 organizations have used WFP cargo services. We have supported everyone from the UN moving large volumes of cargo to the smallest NGO moving a few items. 85% of this cargo is essential health items such as PPEs, diagnostics, and clinical care. The rest is humanitarian items. WFP also set up a global air passenger services, transporting humanitarian and health workers around the world to where they were needed. At a time when large number of commercial carriers grounded services as countries closed their airspace. The WFP passenger service has transported over 25,000 passengers from nearly 400 organizations to 68 countries. Throughout the response, whenever a commercial option became available, WFP discontinued flights to that location. Of the 68 destinations, we are no longer flying to 51 of these. However, we are maintaining the flexibility to restart flights at any time, if and when needed. Another challenge posed by COVID-19 was making sure that aid workers had access to sufficient medical care, enabling them to stay and deliver. WFP participated in the UN MEDEVAC cell, leveraging our experience with medical evacuations and our network of aircrafts. WFP has so far conducted 53 medical evacuations of UN and NGO staff and their dependents. In June, we completed construction of a 68-bed field hospital in Ghana, which has been handed over to WHO to operate. This facility is operational with 34 beds and is on standby to scale up as required. We have also constructed a 92 field hospital in Ethiopia that has been handed over to the Ethiopian Ministry of Health and WHO for the treatment of local population and to be used as a regional training facility for creating emergency medical teams for the future. WFP has worked with many partners throughout the response, other UN agencies, NGOs, civil military actors. Our partnership with WHO has been crucial. Without them, the common service would not have been possible. The private sector has stepped up to support. Among others, I would like to thank Singapore Airlines and Temasek Foundations for providing charter flight and freight space available for a value of 6.5 million, and Takeda, who through a new 5-year partnership with WFP are supporting the pandemic response with $14 million. Months from the onset of the crisis, a number of airlines have now resumed passengers operations, even though now we're seeing again with the second wave hitting the Northern Hemisphere, we're seeing that also being somewhat affected. Markets are improving. Partner pipelines have reduced substantially from initial forecasts. We have therefore been assessing with partners the needs and demands for the common services and have decided to phase down, not phase out, phase down for now. We are maintaining some passenger services where needed and are currently fulfilling the final requests from partners to move cargo. WFP will retain its ability to resume services should the need arise. As we have seen over the last few months, this pandemic is incredibly volatile and we must be ready for whatever it may throw at us. If you allow me, I'll just briefly move on to vaccines. As we all know, the world is racing to produce an approved vaccine. We have Pfizer and Moderna just announced in the past 1 week. However, once this is approved, that will only be the beginning. Ensuring equitable access and distribution of an approved vaccine is crucial for ending the pandemic. Many countries don't have the capacity and infrastructure to equitably deliver a vaccine to their populations. There are many populations that don't fall under an international recognized government controls. For example, Yemen, Afghanistan, Mali, and others. There is also the issue of delivery of the medical supplies needed to administer the vaccine, such as PPEs, syringes, swabs, etc. This in itself is a massive operation. We are currently upgrading our cold chain infrastructure all over our hubs to ensure we are prepared and fully capable for this and future health responses. While we are not looking for a role in COVID-19 vaccine supply chain, we need to be assured that we will not receive a request for support at the very last minute. We are working with all partners in order to leverage our experience, our know-how, our footprint in the field, and our massive infrastructure at the disposal of the lead agencies and the community for any support required. We are working with Gavi, WHO, UNICEF, the Global Fund, CHAI, MSF, ICRC, and others to ensure that we have and they can rely on whatever we can offer in terms of support. It is clear that this pandemic is going to be with us well into next year and perhaps beyond. Even when a vaccine is approved, we will be faced with significant challenges. It is also clear that the world is going to be faced with more and more health emergencies in the future, which we must be all preparing for. Thank you.
Thank you very much for an informative talk. We will start with the question part. Please, the audience, please text your questions in the Q&A part. And we'll start. I have a question. You spoke about the logistics that you are providing, and thank you for providing these services, which are important and crucial. And we heard about these services also from other participants, and they mention how important and crucial are these services. But I would like to start the discussion on something that I know you are doing, but we didn't hear. So I want to ask about the food distribution. And we know that you are purchasing a lot of food locally. But can you tell us about sustainability development and food securing? I think that this sustainability is an important issue for many of the people in the audience. We spoke quite a lot on this meeting about sustainability and developing the country's capacity to produce either PPE or medicine. I would like to hear your experience about food.
Absolutely. You know, 25%, almost to the tune of 25% of our portfolio goes directly for what we call resilience building and development. But we also leverage a lot of what we do in emergency situation to support local farmers. As you heard me say, up to now, we have purchased almost up to the tune of more than 750,000 tons locally and regionally. We have many programs across all our country offices where we work with smallholder farmers. We support them during the planting season. We work with a lot of the community-based organization, with the ministries of agriculture, with FAO and IFAD to support smallholder farmers. Our contribution is by providing food while they're during the planting season. And when they harvest, we purchase through co-ops and through different mechanisms. We buy that food from them to enable or to open the markets for them in order to move it either to different parts of the country for our own emergency life-saving programs and or to move it regionally across borders to other operations across the field where we operate. So we support smallholder farmers. We are also engaging with local capacities on the production of what we call supplementary and nutritious food, i.e. buying local maize, supplementing it with nutrients, and that goes into our feeding programs for our emergency and life-saving activities. School feeding is another avenue we use not only to support education, but we try to rely as much as possible on local markets or local producers. The other significant part of our interventions is our cash programs. So far in the first 3 quarters, and in spite of COVID, we've managed to reach almost $1.7 billion. This is cash pumped into the local economy, foreign currency, supporting foreign reserves, but also enabling the beneficiaries to purchase what they need. And we work and support the retailers in that community by helping them with their supply chain in order to grow their business and have all the supplies that are required by our beneficiaries to be bought by them using cash or credit card, debit card activities. So all of this goes into the local economy, whether it is the farmers, whether it is transforming the local harvest and making it a nutritious food in order to support our nutrition programs, or is the cash interventions that we do. When we say 1.78, just to put things in perspective, we are probably going to reach almost $8.2, $8.4 billion globally as an organization today. This will represent, plus or minus, by the end of the year, almost 20% of our portfolio is cash program that goes into the local economy, putting cash in the hands of our beneficiaries, giving them options, but at the same time, helping the retailers, the suppliers, to ensure that everybody benefits from that intervention. So that's part of our sustainability programs. Now, to come to another something, we are talking about supply chain. One of the biggest dividends that we do in many countries where we operate is we help develop and build many of the private sector, transport sector, in the transport industry. Because of the volumes we bring, or the volumes we buy locally and regionally that requires transport from one part to the other or across the borders, we pay for that to the local transport industry. And in many countries, having a viable transport industry is extremely important and represents quite a significant percentage of the GDP as a transport industry. So that's one other contribution among many others that we do for many of the countries that we operate in. Over.
Thank you very much. Let me read one of the questions that came from the audience. What is the WFP footprint in fragile states, and what role does it see itself playing in downstream supply of medical commodities? What are your biggest concerns about fragile states?
We are in almost all the fragile states across the globe. We are in 86 different countries across the globe. One of the main drivers of hunger is conflicts. And in many of these countries, we do have conflicts, whether it is localized or terrorism. And we operate there. We do cross-line deliveries and operations. We try to reach everybody. However, this is not going away, and we need to be ready for quite a significant uptake in the food insecurity situation in many of the countries. We are on the verge of famines, even in multiple of countries that we are currently in, northwestern Nigeria, South Sudan, Yemen, and Burkina Faso. Now, what worries me in terms of our footprint, of course, we have field offices all across these countries. We have deep field presence, both international and national. But what worries me is the ability of these countries to match the supply of vaccines. When you come to the vaccine and the health supplies, you have to think, you basically have to re-engineer it completely. Starting with the deep field where the population exists, not the center, not the capital, where usually there is a little bit of capacity, but the ability of the local governments, the ministries of health, to reach many of the population who lives in the periphery of these countries, and the infrastructure, the availability of transport modes, cold chain, controls, monitoring, sensitizing the populations. You know, there will come a time where if I am somewhere in Western Darfur, and I have to go and work every day in order to put food on the table of for my family at night, I have to make a choice. Do I not go to work today in order to go and take my family for vaccines and wait in line for hours to get vaccinated and lose the ability to have earnings that day? And then I have to do it again in 3 weeks. So sensitizing the population, getting as close as possible to the community. In many of these places, infrastructure to move several kilometers does not exist. There is the issue of security risk. All of this has to be thought of, mapped out. Plans are made, and with the plan A, plan B, plan C, in order to be able to reach these populations. It's not only the population that we reach by food, because vaccines is for everybody. Over.
Thank you. Another question that came from the audience: which types of coordination structure have you found most helpful when coordinating with local governments and ensuring their awareness of incoming shipments of supply, as if this is needed for forecasting, gap assessment, logistics operation, and so on? What have been some of your lessons learned?
Coordination with the host governments, with the local government is extremely important. But before I get to the government, I think in the case of COVID and in the case, hopefully soon, with vaccines, everybody needs to come around the table. Everybody. And it doesn't mean that I am not a health player that I shouldn't be at the table, because I can contribute in many different ways rather than the pure where the experts are and everything. Everybody needs to leave their egos at the door. This is not about mandates. This is not about territory. This is about people's life. We all need to come together. We were part of the coordination led by WHO and UNICEF in the COVID response. We had 20 staff sitting in Geneva. Now, on the government side, we need to help the governments deal with what is coming their way. Now, the ideal system in any supply chain is to move as quickly as possible from a push system to a pull system. We have to work on that, because we are working with very, very sensitive, low volume, high value commodities, such as vaccines. We cannot afford for shipments to arrive and it doesn't go to a cold chain after it has been delivered at the first point of entry, doesn't go to a cold chain because of customs bureaucracy, or somebody is not there to receive, and so on and so forth. This is all have to be worked with the local government, with the relevant ministries, but it's not only the Minister of Health. It is as much as there is the Minister of Finance, the Customs, the police, everybody. We need to ensure that everybody is aware what's coming, what's needed, who's going to be doing what, and everything. Now, the NGOs and the local civil society plays a major role in this, with the governments, with the UN and humanitarian country teams. All of them need to come together and draw up a plan and map out exactly what infrastructure is there, what is not there, what's the capacity, and what is needed, because that's extremely important. It's not only infrastructure, but a human capacity. Over.
Another attendee is asking, please talk a little bit more about your cold chain network. I think you mentioned upgrading WFP global hubs.
Yeah, we have originally before COVID, we had hubs in Kuala Lumpur, in Dubai, in Ghana, in Panama, and in Brindisi here in Italy. As a result of COVID and in response, we stood up Ethiopia, Southern Africa, and Liège also in Belgium. These hubs remain as part of our network. We are, and as well as Guangzhou, of course, in China. We are upgrading. We have cold chains, but we have cold chains -5 to +5. We have temperature control storage. We don't have, excuse me, I think I'm not catching COVID, but with the weather, it's been like summer here. We need to be able to have ultra cold storage up to +5. So this is quite a significant investments that we are making, but we are not making it because of COVID. Because COVID, as one of the lead experts on pandemics tells me and tells us, and if I'm gonna quote him, COVID is the warning. There will be others in our lifetime. So what we are doing is we're investing now in order to avail it for the vaccine response of COVID-19, but also for the future 10, 15 years to have it available for any emergency health response. So we are increasing our capacity all across our network from Guangzhou, Kuala Lumpur, all the way to Panama and in between.
Thank you. I think I have an interesting question. Have you seen hunger being the driver of conflict rather than the reverse? How has this impact health supply chain? Or do you think it will?
I think that's a catch-22 type of question. We of course, hunger can lead to conflict. Land dispute can lead to conflict that starts with a couple of people and then spreads and widespread everywhere. But what we are seeing and what we've seen over the past 10 years is, in reality, it is conflict that drives hunger. Because once you have conflict, there is no sustainable development. There is no investments. There is no infrastructure. You build something today, it gets burned. You build schools, they get destroyed. Or they get bombed. It depends on which party it is. And the examples across the globe are plenty. Now, COVID has exacerbated an already fragile state of affairs for the world hungry. Economies are stalling. Unemployment is on the rise. I'll give you an example. I was in Central and Latin America back in July, I think. 63% of the workforce in Central and Latin America are daily casual labor. Those people have no income when there is a lockdown. They have no work. They don't work. They don't have food on their tables. We have seen hunger rise in Central and Latin America quadruple, 4 times the rise in food insecure people. Worse than that is the recession they are going through. It is something that they have not seen for 100 years. We're seeing all of a sudden we have to deal and support urban poor. In many countries where we operate, we're seeing more and more hunger rise in urban settings. So it's no longer out there on the periphery. It's no longer away from the capital. It's now in the capital. It's in the major urban centers. So conflict, food insecurity, it's what we call, our executive director keep repeating, we have the COVID or the coronavirus, and we have the hunger virus, both flaring up. We need to deal with both. We need to address both. We need to make sure vaccines get to everybody. We need to make sure that everybody stays safe and healthy. And at the same time, part of them being healthy, ensuring they have all the nutrients and all the nutrition they need, and ensuring they have food to feed themselves and their children. So the world is confronted with a massive challenge. Yet we have enough billionaires around the world. We have people who made so much money in the over the past 8 months because of COVID. And it is no longer about in country or as donor countries, because one of the biggest struggle we had is asking donors, while they are fighting their own COVID challenges within their country, to fund operations across the globe, which they did. But now the challenge is on the vaccines and to ensure that things don't get out of hand in terms of hunger. Over.
Another question from Nagesh. How do you assure quality of food supplies to the communities in this current model and the locally and in the locally owned model?
Our standards are as follows. If we are receiving a donation in kind, it has to be exactly the same standards as what is being sold in the local shops and for the consumers of that country. So if the United States of America donates food to WFP, which they do, they are our major donor, and for that we are very grateful, both in kind and cash. The quality of the food is exactly the same quality that is sold in the stores and the American citizen consumes. So that's in terms of international. And all through our supply chain up to until it reaches the mouth of the beneficiary or the hands of the beneficiary, we ensure that quality is maintained, the same standards, our storage, our handling, and everything. But we have a very sophisticated, dedicated food quality unit that works as part of the supply chain, but reporting line is different. And basically they are like the auditors, if you will. They are watching over everything, ensuring that the quality, the testing is done all through the supply chain up to the beneficiaries. When we buy locally, the same standards apply. We have our set of standards, and the production has to meet these standards. We cannot buy. That's why we work with FAO, with IFAD, with the NGOs, with the civil societies, ministries of agriculture, to ensure that they have the proper seeds, to ensure that there is no overuse of pesticides, and so on and so forth. When the production happens, we test all of that according to international standards before we move it to service our programs and the beneficiaries and the people we serve. So we have controls all through the supply chain. Over.
Is global warming and its impact on conflict a concern that you are actively assessing, or is it still abstract?
No, it's with us. I'm telling you, if you walk in Rome today, we're in mid-November. You walk in Rome today, you can walk with a short sleeve and a short. It's with us. Look at the hurricane. We have gone beyond the hurricane season in Central and Latin America. The hurricane season usually, almost always, ends by end of October. We have 2 massive hurricanes just hitting Nicaragua, Honduras, and other areas, devastating hurricanes. No, we are dealing with that. We're trying to reduce our green gas emissions. That's why we increase our local purchases, not only to support, but also to reduce our green gas. But climate change is with us. It's not a matter of it's coming, it is with us. And we need to put everything in place in terms of mitigation against it. That's why, honestly speaking, we are barely keeping our heads above the water in terms of not only responding to COVID, operating under the conditions of COVID, but also responding to all emergencies across the globe. We still have emergencies. COVID came as on top of the ongoing emergencies we have, and natural disasters and hurricanes and typhoons are all there, and we have to deal with them.
Mr. Daoudi, I have a question here. Yehuda, if you don't mind, if I may interrupt the question. So you spoke a lot about, WFP's role in responding to emergencies. But you also, as part of your food program, that's not necessarily an emergency issue. That's kind of a routine, perhaps round the year stuff that you do in many countries. So the question broadly is, similar to the need for food in many countries is around the year, there is also a need for health. And given that you already have extensive supply chain infrastructure, both logistics, distribution, et cetera, in these countries, you stepped up effectively to kind of help WHO, et cetera, do lots of things in different countries. But do you see a continued role for WFP's logistics, leveraging logistics services, supply chain services in delivery of routine health, whether it is, distribution of bed nets or whatever, and I don't hear that happening too much, but I think there's potential for that happening quite a bit. And that may require coordination. And there was a question in the Q&A box also about coordination across other international agencies, whether it is, UNICEF for vaccines or other agencies. So that's kind of one question. And then there is a follow-on, which is slightly different. I'll ask that. You mentioned about in the connection with private sector, you say you leverage private sector where you can. In fact, you also help develop some markets, whether it's in distribution or in production. So which means you need to have some kind of assessment capability when you go into a country saying, how much do you build on your own, WFP's own things, and how much do you leverage the private sector? And that's first, you need an assessment framework, but you also need to walk that fine line, because often in certain aid kind of situations, I know you're not providing the aid, you're actually channeling the aid, but in aid situations, you end up destroying local markets also, right?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for those two questions. As we speak, we are moving vaccines on behalf of UNICEF to many countries where commercial flights don't exist. And we will continue to do that. We are in support of UNICEF. We see our role in health emergency. I did not go into the breadth of what we do in the field. To give you an example, you talked about bed nets and the like. We are a partner of the Global Fund. We carry out logistics assessments and logistics support and delivery in many countries in Africa on behalf of the Global Fund. We work with UNICEF. We work with WHO. We see our role we are not health specialists, and we have a say in my part of the world. It says, may God bless a person that knows its limits and stops at it. We are quite a very sophisticated logistics machinery, anchored with food, but we do a wide variety of things, and in support of all other players, whether it is health, whether it is agriculture, whatever, we do it, building on what the existing. We are partners of WHO in Ebola response West Africa, in Ebola response Congo, cholera in Yemen. So, and this partnership is being strengthened and got delayed a little bit because of COVID, but in reality, we are our role, we see our role in health emergencies as an enabler. We enable so that the medical experts can focus on dealing with the health emergency, and we are in the back making sure the entire infrastructure is functioning, from transport to accommodation to office space to logistics to everything. So that's part of our partnership, and we leverage that across the globe for everybody. Now, to come to the assessments we do, and we have what we call logistics capacity assessment that was created back in 1996, just a little bit of history. And what we did is we go and we update these logistics capacity assessment per country across the globe. It is available for all partners across the globe through the logistics cluster, which WFP leads. And we have given that tool to be, of course, developed and enhanced to the logistics cluster, and they've done fantastic job with it. And we have logistics capacity assessment across the globe, even for countries where we do not operate or the humanitarian community is not in, just in case. And we keep these updated. We have airspace regulations, airports, infrastructures across the globe. I don't want the world to think of us as a central intelligence agency. We're not, but we are called upon oftentimes to deploy to countries where we don't even have a presence. Lebanon, 2006, WFP had no presence, yet we set up the entire infrastructure for the response to the war in Lebanon. So we carry that out. But I want to go to the private sector. WFP, what we do is actually work completely. 100% of what we do is with the private sector. All what we do as WFP is manage that. We break the supply chain and ensure we manage it. Any given day, you have 30 to 40 ships plowing the seas, carrying WFP food. This is an asset. It's like a floating storage, because when an emergency happens, we can divert. If that ship was intended to Tanzania and we have a situation in Somalia, we can contact the donor immediately and say, is it okay for us to divert? And then repay Tanzania, and we divert. These ships don't belong to WFP. We charter through the international market. Our planes, we have 120 planes on average under the UNHAS banner flying. These are all rented and hired and chartered from the international market. Our trucks, everything we do, our warehouses, very little except the warehouses that we set up, which we buy. These are mobile storage units. Other than that, everything is rented from the private sector. We don't want to distort market. What we did in COVID, if it wasn't, there was a question at the beginning when we said we're gonna offer the service for free to the international community, to the health responders. Now, let me just refresh the markets. I think in April, everybody saw how world powers were competing, not only for cargo space, but also for products from China. We all saw on TV some of these things happening. When we came and offered free to users, we stabilized the market, because commercial is commercial. More and more competition, higher the prices. We stabilized the market. We went into the market with our operators and said, that's the continuity of the business. These are the rates. And we managed to maintain, when the market rate was $15 per kilogram, we were moving at $10 per kilogram, and the prices followed us. Also, oftentimes in many countries where we operate, we open the way to the private sector. I give you an example. We created a passenger hub in Ghana. When the commercial travel, passenger travel was almost grounded completely around the world. Some international airlines that did not call to Ghana when the market recovered started calling Ghana, saying, we bring international passengers, especially the humanitarian and the health responders, and then they ferry to all of West and Southern Africa from Ghana on the WFP flights. So we do open markets for the private sector to follow. We try, and we are cognizant of the fact that sometimes we might end up distorting the market, but we watch that very carefully. We watch the rates. We make sure that we stabilize the rates. Because of our volumes, we keep the rates down. We don't have anything to hide. All our documents are public documents. We have a governance system that everything is posted there. Our budgets are there. So we do try our best. I'm not saying all the time we're successful, but on average, and quite a significant, we do help and contribute to the private sector in the countries where we operate. Over.
Excellent, thank you. I typed it in the chat box. You're like the Amazon for humanitarian health response.
Hey, let me. I think I'm gonna be having a discussion with Jack, with what's his name, the Amazon. And here is where the private sector. I originally come from the private sector. I'm very proud to be part of the humanitarian community. I'm proud to be a member of WFP. But the private sector is fantastic in the part of the world where they operate.
Of course, yeah.
But in the part of the world where we operate, our logistics services are second to none. Where was the private sector in April and May? Where was Amazon in April and May? They were delivering to Europe, landing in Liège and trucking everything. But were they flying everywhere? No. We stood up a massive international airline, both passengers and cargo. So the partnership with the private sector needs to rely on both capabilities. And this is extremely important. Even in the vaccine, they have massive capacity. But in the part of the world where we operate, if the airspace is closed, like in many countries where we are delivering vaccines now on behalf of UNICEF, on our passengers' aircraft, the private sector doesn't go. They're a bit more risk averse than we are. So that's all what I'm saying.
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Okay, we are running out of time. So I want to thank you for a fantastic presentation, but I want to thank you, and perhaps it's more important, for a fantastic job you are doing in your job in delivering stuff for the pandemic and for and food for the needy. So I would like to thank you for both of these things, and we have to go.
Thank you very much, and thanks for hosting me. Very much appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our honor to have you on this session.
Thank you.
Amer. Thank you.